Rich Gallagher from Sweetwater. This is Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear, and we're joined by Andy Paredes. Great to have you here. You are a product specialist for Line 6.
That's right. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, I can't really reach across and,
That's all right.
and shake your hand. We're a ways apart because we have two really cool amplifiers to talk about today. These are brand new from Line 6.
That's right. So these are the PowerCab series, which has been something that people have been asking about for a while, is what's the best thing to plug an amp modeler into?
Right.
Right. And I think for a lot of us, a flat response PA speaker can work, and it does for situations, but aesthetically it's not really what people are used to. And I think that was kind of the impetus behind doing something like PowerCab, where it's a great speaker that's a flat response speaker that looks like a traditional amplifier, and you can plug any amp modeler into it. It doesn't need to be specifically Line 6. Any brand amp modeler that you just need to get great power on stage from and move a lot of air, the PowerCab is going to do that for you.
Right, right. We actually have two different models here, and I want to talk about the differences, but give us a little bit more in-depth rundown on what this really is. What makes this special? Right.
So to me, the things that make it special, besides what we were already talking about, is you're going to get lots of air moving. You can do about 125 dB out of the unit. I mean, so it's definitely going to move as much as a traditional amp would on stage. For people who just really need to have a speaker on stage with them. I mean, there are some players who have no issue playing with in-ear monitors or just having things coming up from a front wash. But for some player styles, or just to feel right at home, they need to have the pants leg kind of flapping.
Right.
And that's really what this is designed for, is people using amp modelers who need that type of vibe on stage. And also the idea about amp in the room. I think when a lot of guitar players, like I didn't grow up playing in a studio with a couple great monitors in front of me and classic mics crammed in front of it. I was used to that amp being 4 feet from me,
Right.
And so that idea of amp in the room was a big kind of motivator for doing this. So not only is this a great flat response system for any amp modeler, we actually did a new type of modeling for us, which is just speaker modeling. This is a little bit different than what we've done in the past, because we'll do it's a 112 with a specific speaker, with a specific microphone, and a specific distance.
Right.
This is just the speaker being modeled. So all of those classic speakers that we grew up with and we associate with the classic amp manufacturers, the greens and the creams and the blues and so on, well, we actually model just those speakers, and we have those in here.
Okay.
So if somebody wants to recall them by doing, just going in the back end, let's say there's a specific sound, that vintage sound that you really want to go for, and maybe your device doesn't have speaker modeling in it, or doesn't have impulse response options, you can just go in there and you can dial it in on the back.
Okay. Right. Right.
But the difference between the 112 and the 112 Plus, not only are you going to have the option for manually switching that, but you actually even have the option for controlling by MIDI. So for example, when I pull up something like this, just looking at the Helix here, looking at that camera, you're going to notice that it just went to a flat response. So for example, right now, this is just a flat response, the way most people would probably run an amp modeler that has speaker modeling and mics in it. However, maybe I want to maybe pull up like a voltage clean amp, which is kind of a mid-gain amp, but you'll notice here it's now going red, so it's in the red vintage mode. So if you look on the Helix, you'll notice it has the classic amp, but it's not going to be what you would expect with cab. So now, and I can just switch this around, and you're going to notice, for example, here it's the Placator amp model, but you'll notice there's no actual cab model here, but I am using the greenbacks.
Okay, so in this case then, just so I'm clear, basically there are two places here where we can have the actual speaker modeling take place, either in the Helix or in the PowerCab. And in this case, we're hearing the speaker inside the PowerCab, and that's going to work better because you have to put a microphone in front of the cabinet when you're on stage with it.
And really, absolutely, it depends on what the application is. For me, obviously, with Helix, we have great cab models and great mics already in there. But Line 6 has made products in the past where maybe there weren't the mic options that you want, or there weren't the cabinet options that you want.
Right.
So another thing that a lot of people asked for was to have a or a speaker system that could actually load impulse responses into it, and that's one of the differences you'll see between the PowerCab 112 and the 112 Plus is we can load 128 impulse responses into the cabinet.
Wow.
That's not so obviously Helix can do impulse responses. A lot of high-end modelers can, but Line 6, we've been making the Pod HD 500 for years and years, and that was one of the biggest requests was, hey, can you make it with impulse responses? So I'm going to jump up here in this first bang. When I hit this clean sound, right now what you're seeing here is the Jarvis model. So this is just the amp here, down here, with no speaker cabinet. If I wanted to load an impulse response here, I could, but what I actually did is I'm just going to load my impulse responses up here.
Okay, into the actual PowerCab.
Exactly. Right now I've got the Bayou happening here. So here's an example of what happens if I want to switch between going from a flat response, just so that's with the cabinet here, but I can actually jump and switch it here. So it's really, where do you want the control to come from? You know?
Right.
And to me, the idea of doing it with MIDI was very important. We obviously will do it over a proprietary L6 link, but there's a lot of amp models out there that aren't going to use that. So we did give people the option to switch by MIDI if they want to.
Okay. So does the PowerCab come with a variety of speakers pre-installed or speaker models pre-installed?
It does. So you're going to actually get 6 different speaker models pre-installed. Obviously, a lot of the classics, kind of the usual suspects.
Sure.
Obviously, the flat response mode is going to be in there. So if you want to do your cabinet and or mic modeling on your modeler, you can do that. It does also have a raw speaker mode. So if you don't want to have maybe the coax thing happening, you just want the raw 12, you can do that. But it's also going to have impulse responses in it as well on the 112 Plus. So Line 6 teamed with Dan Boole, if you might remember him from 65 amps. Sure. So Dan came in and did a really awesome impulse response pack that Line 6 has called the Allure Pack. So the Allure Pack is actually it's a free download for anybody who wants to load IRs, but that's actually going to be inside the 112 Plus.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So you mentioned coaxial speakers. So mechanically, if you will, we've got a amplifier here that actually has 2 speakers. There's is it a 12-inch driver and then a tweeter or a horn inside?
Well, it's actually going to be a 12-inch speaker, and then the horn is actually inside the 12-inch speaker. So it's not like a traditional, you think of a PA speaker, with the big thing and then the little lips at the top. It's not like that.
Okay, right. So it's coming from basically a point, so you can stick a microphone in front of it and you're getting the full response out of it. But you mentioned raw speaker mode, and I think that's something worth going back to because that turns off the tweeter basically and gives you the 12-inch speaker like you'd have in a traditional guitar amp. And that's going to be great if you want to run like your pedal board straight in, without having the full frequency response coming from the tweeter. So it gives you another option for using other effects with this as well.
Absolutely. There's always going to be situations where people will want to turn on or off things, and that's kind of the beauty of technology, right? Like we have the option in the old days. You look at what people like Hendrix and I think now. We always think of they must have had these huge rack systems and all this stuff. I mean, he was going on stage with 3 pedals. Right. So I think we become spoiled as technology has progressed and made life easier. But to me, you can think of it as being too much information. But to me, it's just now you have choices. And back in the old days, you didn't have choices. You were just stuck with whatever. But yeah, absolutely, you're going to have the raw speaker mode or the flat response mode, and you can switch between either one.
Right. One application that I immediately see jumps into my head for that is if you're doing a wet dry or a wet dry wet, and you're using this as your stereo cab. So you'd have your traditional guitar amp, if you will, in the center, come out of the effects loop into a stereo processor, and then into this in raw mode, and you're going to get a much more of a guitar amp type of response from your effects loop.
Oh, that's a great.
So it seems like it would be great for that application because these are also really lightweight.
Yeah, they're 33 pounds, I believe, for the 112, and about 35 pounds for the 112 Plus, which is a lot easier to lug around.
Yeah, definitely is. And so for that application where you're going to have a couple of different amplifiers, or if you're using them in stereo.
Yep.
It certainly is nice to have that diminished weight that you have to manage as you're moving things around. So that's very cool.
Absolutely.
So any features we've missed talking about with the PowerCabs?
The couple last things that I think are just great from a live performance aspect is the fact that it does have tilt back legs, so you can actually kick it back. I mean, I've seen a million people in clubs like kicking it back against like a coffee can or something, but this actually does have the legs built into it. Another really neat feature that I like is the fact that it does have an Xlr Out to go to front of house. And again, it's just kind of one of those things when there's a mic stand on stage, you just somehow, some way, you're going to probably kick it at some point. So the fact that you can do just a pass-through XLR to go to front of house, if that's an option. But I think for a lot of us, when we've got 15, 20 minutes to get on stage, we've got even less time to get off stage, you know, the sound person doesn't have the time to deal with, you know, like straight pass and all that. They just want to throw whatever's on stage in front of that, and you got to play. And that to me is one of the great things about having this feature. Right,
so it really does bridge that gap and take the modeler on stage in a way that lets you use it more like a traditional guitar amplifier, providing the monitoring for you, providing a solution for putting a mic in front of it and just being ready to go.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Andy, thanks so much for coming in and showing these to us. I mean, there's so many great features here, and it just looks like an ideal solution for any guitar players using a modeler.
Absolutely. No, we agree, and we're looking forward to having these on the field.
All right. Great to see you.
You too.
Thanks for coming in.
Absolutely.
And thank you for joining me for Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear. Be sure to tune in next time. We'll have more guitars, more amps, more effects, and we'll be making lots of music. I'm Mitch Gallagher.